Good evening, friends, and welcome to this edition of the Driskell Debrief. How are you this Tuesday? I hope that you've had a phenomenal week since we last saw one another. I know that things have been busy for me. I imagine they've been busy for you. So let's get busy in the chat. Let me hear how you're doing. I especially want to hear from folks who might have been impacted by Tropical Storm Debbie or Hurricane Debbie, depending on at what point and then where you were in the state and how you experienced the storm. How was it for you? Did you come out safely? Did you experience any flooding? Are you having any problems getting access to FEMA or any help or assistance that you might need, depending on, how severe the storm was for you? So get busy in the chat. I want to hear from you. How's it going? Let us hear from you. I hope that you and your families are safe. I hope that hopefully your property didn't suffer too much damage. I saw pictures of cars, like vehicles floating away. There was all kind of flooding in certain parts of the state. And really, my heart goes out to anyone who was adversely impacted by that storm. And you should know that my team and I are here to help to get you connected to any resources that you might need. So please let us know in the chat how you're doing. I'll give you a bit of an update on our past week. Yeah, Team Ventress has been very busy. First, I actually was honored to send a letter of congratulations to Bulis Baptist International Church for their 159th church anniversary. Beulah Baptist is one of the oldest African American churches in Tampa, Florida, and they are under the leadership of Pastor Alan Harris, and they are celebrating 159 years as an institution. That's just amazing to me. And for any folks who are in Tampa and who might know of Beulah, you know what a shining example Beulah has been in the community. It has been steadfast and it is continuing to grow under Pastor Harris's leadership. So congratulations to Beulah. We're so happy for you and so delighted to celebrate alongside you. Now, let's turn to a little update about what's happening in Florida politics. And I got to tell y'all, what I'm about to share with you has just been super disappointing to me. So Florida has the opportunity to participate in what's known as a summer EBT program. And basically, this is a program that would allow the state to draw down federal dollars that, mind you, Floridians have paid into the federal tax system. So these are our dollars. We could draw down federal dollars that would provide lunches for kids during the summer. And if you don't know, unfortunately, Florida actually has a lot of food insecurities. And there are a lot of families and a lot of kids who depend on meals that schools can provide during the summer, definitely during the school year, but also during the summer. And there is a deadline coming up on August 15th, which is in just 2 days, for the state to apply for this program for 2025. Now, the state also failed to apply for the program for 2024, but we have been trying to put pressure on the governor and on his administration to apply for this program. So a lot of advocates about food insecurity and child hunger have been pushing for this, for the governor to apply for this program or for his administration to do it. And I have to tell you, it really doesn't sit well with me that the governor has made food insecurity a political issue. We should not be politicizing school lunches. We should not be politicizing families' needs and making sure that kids have nutritious meals to get them through the summer. And, as we've watched this, it's just felt like another one of the governor's political stunts. And he's, rather than like addressing the affordability crisis that so many families are facing, he just continues to want to score political points. And it's like, dude, for what? Like, could you please cut it out? And so I sent a letter as leader of the caucus to the governor today and to the secretary of the agency that would be in charge of this, and just asking them to please meet this deadline and apply for this program. And let me tell you this. This is a fact that was quoted in the Florida Phoenix today. They wrote an article about it. The USDA estimates that more than 2 million children in Florida would get around $259 million in federal aid through the program. Florida, this is the kicker, Florida would only have to fund half of the administrative costs to distribute the benefits, which adds up to $13 million. So friends, our state could pay $13 million into a system and in return receive over $258 million in aid for hungry kids. And the governor has refused to do this. 13 million is only 5% of that $258 million figure. So if you care about this, if this is something that you feel passionate about and you want to get active, you can actually just call the governor's office and let them know how you feel. You could even send a letter to the governor's office and let them know how you feel. Well, shoot, I guess the deadline's August 15th. So maybe you can send an email to the governor's office to let them know how you feel about this. You can call your local state representative and your state senator's office. It's actually critically important, I think, that we put some pressure on them to get this done. If you don't know who your local elected official is, whether it's your state rep or your state senator, you can actually go to myfloridahouse.gov. That's myfloridahouse.gov. And they have a little link on there that says find my representative. And you can type in your address and it'll tell you your state representative, your state senator, your United States congressperson, and of course your US senator. So it'd be a great idea for you to get engaged in this if you feel as passionate about it as I do. So that's myfloridahouse.gov, and you can click on the Find My Representative link, and it'll let you know also who you can reach out locally and ask them to put pressure on the governor about this. So we've been busy, but what else is new? We're in the middle of a primary election. By the way, primary election day is coming up on August 20th. So please, please, please make sure that you are prepared to cast your vote. Early voting is going on now. And so it'd be great if you can go ahead and take care of that. Go ahead and get it out of the way. If you've requested a vote by mail ballot, please go ahead and turn it in. It is essential that we vote in primaries because many races are decided at the primary level. And that's for races where maybe there are only 2 Democrats running. It determines certain judicial races. We certainly want to make sure that your voice is heard. So please make sure you cast a ballot. Now, to the fun part of tonight, we have a very special guest. It is none other than Representative Lindsey Cross. Representative Cross is a member of my caucus, and I have to tell you, I love working alongside Representative Cross. She is so passionate. She is our strongest voice on environmental issues, and she really cares about the people that she serves. So let me tell you a little bit about Rep. Cross. Representative Lindsey Cross is an accomplished environmental scientist with over 2 decades of dedicated service cleaning up the water in Tampa Bay and protecting natural areas statewide. So given that she's been doing this for over 2 decades, they basically recruited her out of the crib and she started working because you'll see, she's super young. Raised in the Midwest, Representative Cross appreciates the transformative power of public education, inspired by her parents who were public school educators. Her passion for Florida, its residents, and its invaluable natural beauty led her to choose St. Pete as her home. Rep. Cross earned a master's in environmental science and policy at the University of South Florida, go Bulls, where she identified ways to improve water quality. Her professional career includes advanced or leadership roles in the private sector, government, and nonprofit sectors, contributing to remarkable improvements in water quality and environmental health. In the state legislature, Rep. Cross has continued her mission of protecting Florida's natural environment and water and championed, get this, more than $1 billion in water and land conservation funding last year alone. She's delivered on her campaign promises, passing legislation to increase affordable housing and sponsoring bills addressing water quality, resilience, and healthcare costs. Her ability to recognize the local impact of policies and propose practical solutions absolutely sets her apart. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Representative Lindsey Cross. Hey, Rep.
Hello, Leader Driskell. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. It's so nice to be on here with you.
I'm so delighted to have you. Thank you for making time. And guys, Rep. Cross is in the middle of a campaign battle, right? She is one of our top priority seats where she is holding it down for Democrats in Pinellas County. And we really appreciate her for doing that. So thank you for taking time to be on. It's my understanding you just got back from canvassing.
I did. I just got back, just got out of the shower. So my hair is a little damp, but I would not have missed it. We knocked out, we finished a precinct tonight. So that's always a good thing.
That's awesome. That's like my anime, freeze, when you're in action. So, all right. So let's go ahead and get into it, Rep. Cross.
Yeah.
How would you define climate change, and why do you think some political figures, especially extremists, seem to fear the term extremists on the right?
Yeah. So I appreciate that we're having this conversation. Climate change is really the long-term change in weather patterns. Sometimes people say weather is what you see outdoor, but climate is, what you experience over a long term. And so in many parts of the world, particularly in Florida, what we're seeing is more extreme weather. If you've been outside this summer, you know that it's hot. We're starting to have more extreme hurricanes and storms earlier than we're used to during the hurricane season, which starts on, started a couple months ago, but we're seeing more erratic changes in weather patterns. Some parts of the US are seeing less rain. And so places that have drought conditions, that have low rainfall already, you may have heard that the Great Salt Lake in Utah is drying up. And so we have places that don't have enough water. And then we have places that are getting too much water. So the storm that we had last week brought an incredible amount of rainfall to parts of our state, 12 inches in 24 hours, even more than that in some places. So it's often categorized by more extreme rainfall, more extreme temperatures.
Thank you for that. Thank you for also for putting that in a very accessible way for those of us who are not environmental scientists. Mm-hmm. So speaking of Debbie, the storm that just passed through, how did your district do? How was your district impacted?
So my district, District 60, includes portions of St. Petersburg, Pinellas Park, and a little bit of unincorporated Pinellas County in an area called Lillman. So I have communities all along Tampa Bay, areas like Shore Acres have made news headlines, have been in the New York Times for the wrong reasons, because these are neighborhoods that are having repetitive flooding. Pinellas County actually has some of the highest rates of repetitive flooding in the entire state. And it's not necessarily the places that are on the beaches. Shore Acres, another neighborhood called Riviera Bay. These places a lot of them were created back in the 1950s, midway through the century, when we didn't have some of the stronger regulations around protecting wetlands that we do now. So if you think of a marshy area, developers back in the 50s would dredge up some of that mucky area, pile it up. So you would create land and then you'd create water. So you would have upland areas with canals running through there. So you'd be creating a lot of waterfront property. But some of those areas were built, at an elevation that, 50, 70 years ago was not being impacted by high tides and by some of the flooding. But now, as we've seen sea level rise increase, those areas are getting inundated, not just during our storms, but sometimes during high tides. Some of our king tides, which are unusually high tides that are usually correlated with full moons, and then certainly during some of these storm events. So a couple of my neighborhoods did have impacts, not as much as they did from Idalia, but we still had several dozen of, I think about 42 houses that had some level of flooding, either within their livable space or their garage areas. So it's a big concern.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that too. And you raised such a good point in terms of, the building that's taken place, the development, I guess I should say, that's taken place in Florida over the years. And it sounds like what worked a long time ago no longer works. And there are ways where maybe we're not prepared as a state to really address the issues or even, encounter and live with the impact of climate change. Did you feel like your area was ready to deal with this? And St. Pete is an area that's so close to the water. I mean, do you feel like, how's St. Pete dealing with climate change too?
Yeah. So on a kind of a city and a county and a regional level, we are doing more than I think a lot of areas. And I'm proud of the efforts from City of St. Petersburg, from Pinellas County. Those local governments have been working cooperatively, as well as a group called the Tampa Bay Resilience Coalition. And so those groups for over a decade have been looking at their vulnerability and looking at ways to improve conditions and make things safer. Our flood insurance rates are actually lower in Pinellas County and St. Pete because of proactive measures that have been taken from our local governments. And so it's really important that we recognize some of those things that have been done. On an individual, kind of a neighborhood level, I did see a stronger response and people being more prepared for this storm. And it's because it's been less than a year and they've had two, significant storms, both Idalia and a no-name storm that we had in mid-December, where we had streets, we had homes that were flooded. And so people took it really seriously. I was out the weekend before helping residents to fill sandbags, delivering sandbags to people out in the community with our city checking on some new pumps that they've installed to try to alleviate some of the water in the roads during these high tides. Because what's happened is that when the tide water comes up so high, the stormwater systems, which are gravity fed, the level of Tampa Bay essentially is higher than the level of the stormwater system. So they actually have to physically pump something up and over to get back out to the bay and keep it out of the streets. So there's a lot of things that are happening on the engineering side, but there's much more need than we've been able to address so far.
I'm really learning a lot. I love that you know this area so well. And so, I mean, let's talk about that though, because we've seen an increase in intense rainfall and severe storms across the state of Florida. And I know in Tampa, it's not in the part of town that I represent, but in South Tampa, for example, if there's a heavy rain, like a lot of the streets are just going to flood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, could you talk about how these changes have impacted infrastructure and the daily lives of Floridians? And then hit a little more about why it's important for Floridians to understand and to prepare for these challenges.
Yeah, so it's something that's becoming more frequent, and it's definitely a big disruption for people. There's things that we need to be looking at cooperatively at the city, the state, and the federal level, and that's something I've been doing, trying to bring partners together by hosting town halls in some of these communities, working really collaboratively. Just recently with Congresswoman Kathy Castor, who oversees parts of Tampa as well as St. Petersburg, the city council member, Brandy Gabbard, there to do a tour of one of the neighborhoods and see some of the direct impacts. That helps us to identify where some of the most immediate needs are. And, we kind of think of it almost like a triage situation, that there's things that we may be able to address in the short term. But as a legislature, we need to be looking at where the state can make investments, but also bringing forward policies that are going to make us more resilient in the future. I'm glad that we have the Resilient Florida Grant Program, which has been helping some of our communities look at some of their vulnerabilities and make some plans. We did see a decrease in funding appropriated to that program this year, even though the need has just continued to grow. And as communities start to move from the planning phase to the implementation, many of these infrastructure projects cost, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. And so if we extrapolate that out across the entire state, there's just, significant needs in what we need to be doing. And also looking at where we want to be developing in the future. And that's not a conversation that's easy to have, but when you have areas that have repetitive flooding, you have families who are disrupted and, can't safely live in their neighborhoods anymore. We need to have conversations that involve those residents, those local leaders, to talk about how we can best make sure that they are safe, that we are using our taxpayer dollars wisely. If there's, government funds that are included in that, and what our state's going to look like over the coming decades.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you're saying, it sounds like we need our policymakers to really face reality. Right? Like it's like we have to face the reality of where people are living, what
Hmm.
it's like for what people are experiencing as they live there.
Yeah.
The dangers really of building on the coast sometimes,
Hmm.
which, like you said, is difficult to talk about. But then I also wonder if part of what we're facing with, oh, hi, hello, beautiful.
Oh,
I
sorry.
wonder,
It's, my lighting is not perfect tonight. Sorry.
it is all good. But I wonder if part of what we're facing in that there's like the infrastructure is not prepared, to handle these stronger storms and higher rainfalls, is that maybe we had policymakers who were not facing reality along the way. And that's how we're in the situation with inadequate infrastructure. Is
Yeah.
that yes, no, yes? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we look at prevention, um, particularly when it comes to pollution, is the most cost-effective solution. If you can prevent pollution before it occurs, it's cheaper than trying to clean it up once it's in our water bodies. The same thing holds true for some of these climate policies and resiliencies. Um, we spend a lot of money on mitigation, but we haven't worked on any of the prevention. And so things that have happened at the state level, about removing climate change from our state statutes and prohibiting certain types of renewable energy are just further entrenching us in this really unsustainable pattern that we're in. So it's like the analogy of if your bathroom is flooding, you first turn off the tub before you use the towels to soak up the water on the floor. If you're trying to soak up the water while the faucet's still on, you're going to be there forever and the situation's just going to get worse.
I love that analogy. Let's talk a little bit about how our oceans are warming up. So,
Mhm.
how are warmer ocean waters and higher temperatures affecting local communities in your district? And can you talk to me about any specific examples of how these changes are manifesting, whether in your district or elsewhere?
Yeah, so water temperature, a lot of our plant and animal species, our marine life is very dependent both on temperature and salinity, as well as the clarity of water. If you look at seagrasses, that's one of the indicator species in Tampa Bay and a lot of coastal ecosystems. It's an important habitat for small fish and things like crabs and scallops. It's also a food source for manatee and sea turtles. So it's a very important. It's also critical if we want to have a commercial and recreational fishing industry, because if you don't have seagrass, you're not going to have the fish to go catch.
Mhm.
Seagrass is very sensitive to light conditions. It needs a certain amount of light to be able to grow for photosynthesis. So if water is cloudy or the depth increases with sea level rise, it's harder for that light to penetrate down to the seagrasses and grow. Similarly, temperature can impact that. If the water temperature is too hot, that can stress the seagrass. It can lead to less optimal conditions. And then when you combine that with some of the other stressors of pollution and increasing water depth, it can be a really negative situation and can lead to decreases. One of the places where water temperature is the most deadly is in our Florida Keys and those ecosystems where we've seen death of seagrass, but we're also seeing massive declines in our coral reef ecosystems. And some scientists are estimating that 90% or more of our reefs are damaged or dead to the point of no return. So water temperature, just like air temperature, stresses living organisms, and many of them have evolved over tens of thousands, millions of years to be adapted to fairly stringent conditions. And so when it goes outside of that range, it makes it harder for them to survive.
Right. And we're part of the chain of the coral reef that's like North America's only barrier reef, right? Like it's actually a
Hmm.
really important
Yeah.
reef. Yeah. The coral health is actually really essential. So So there was a bill this past session. It was House Bill 1645, and it introduced a ban on offshore wind turbines,
Mhm.
which was just kind of ridiculous to me. And I remember the rationale was like, well, we don't have a lot of wind, but the reality is that it could impact other renewable energy efforts in our
Mhm.
state. So why should people be concerned about the future of renewable energy in our state?
Well, if we want to work on addressing some of the root causes of man-made climate change, we have to reduce the amount of carbon that's being emitted into the atmosphere. And so
Mhm.
we know that carbon is a byproduct of burning dirty fossil fuels like coal and natural gas. And so if you want to get away from that, you have to shift to more renewable sources of energy like solar and wind. Solar arguably is the most viable in the state of Florida. We're not nearly where we should be because there's been attempts to make it more difficult for homeowners to put solar on their rooftops. There's, it's more expensive to have homeowners insurance if you have rooftop solar. So just like there's all these things to make voting more difficult and, a tax on democracy that way, there's these subtle things that all add up to make it to keep us really entrenched into the same mixture of fossil fuels that are largely controlled by just a few corporations in our state. And so by banning a type of renewable energy, it really says we don't want to do anything to help the situation. We're more concerned with the profits of some corporations over the long term, health and viability of our state.
So this bill that we're talking about, House Bill 1645, also removed references to climate change from Florida legislation. Like
Mhm.
they just completely took the word climate change out wherever
Yeah,
it appeared
yeah.
in our statute. So how do you view this change, and what do you think it means for Floridians who are already dealing with climate change related challenges?
Well, I mean, in a way, it just says we care more about corporate profits than we do about the people in our state. You know,
Yeah.
that's a simple message. Some of the programs that were cut were looking at how our government entities can buy more fuel efficient vehicles and make sure that they were making wise investments with our taxpayer dollars. Why would we get rid of things that are not only making our air quality and water quality better, but are saving taxpayer dollars on our vehicles? That doesn't make sense. I know that one of the sustainability officers in the city of Orlando, who's now working for the Biden administration, policies that he worked on that helped get into state law were struck from state statute just with that one bill. And so there are a lot of local municipalities that are trying to be proactive. They are responding to what their residents want, which is more renewable energy, more opportunities for electric vehicle charging stations. That's another thing that the state preempted to the Department of Ag. So it's more difficult for cities to put in the EV charging infrastructure. So many of these things are just keeping us, entrenched in these really dangerous patterns. And it tells Floridians and local residents that what they need and what's going to keep them and their children safe, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about actually I just want to note though, right? Because that's the message, right? Like that's the message that from one side of the aisle that people are getting, but I do want folks to know just how hard our caucus fights for them, how
Mhm.
hard the Florida House Democrats fight for them, and Rep. Cross, how much we appreciate you oftentimes being at the tip of those arguments and really leading the charge as we push back and try to make sure that Floridians can lead safe lives that are minimally impacted by climate change. We certainly do the best we can, don't we, of pushing back
Mhm.
and providing the other side of that narrative.
We do. We
So
do.
thank you for that. So we know affordability is a top issue for Floridians, and I don't care whether people are in the
Hmm.
Panhandle or the Florida Keys, everybody's dealing with it. And part of this is because of skyrocketing property insurance rates.
Yeah.
I see a direct connection between what's happening with the property insurance market and climate change. Could you talk a little about how you've seen Floridians struggle with the property insurance
Mhm.
market, and whether you see any climate-related solutions to try to help with issues of insurance affordability?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, in my district, just like across Florida, property insurance and just the the economic issues, how Florida is not affordable anymore.
Mhm.
Those are the top concerns. And you know, literally talked with an older woman last night who is in her 80s. Her husband passed away last year. She's living on one Social Security check.
Mm.
Her home insurance quadrupled. She doesn't know if she can pay her property insurance anymore or if she should get rid of her car. And she's thinking about not having insurance. I spoke with another gentleman tonight who doesn't pay for homeowners insurance because he can't afford it either. And those people are very vulnerable if something happens. Because we have more extreme weather, because we're having more hurricanes and tropical storms, that is adding to the vulnerability across our state and really putting people at risk. And so to address the property insurance crisis. I know that the House Democrats put forward our own ideas in what would be some more balanced solutions that provided accountability, that would require the big insurance companies to share some of those the benefit, the windfall from the $3 billion in taxpayer money in the form of lower rates for the residents, and it was rejected. So there is absolutely more work that we need to do, not only on addressing some of the climate change related issues, but for looking at our reinsurance, because we know that foreign reinsurance companies are making significant profits off of Floridians because that market is not regulated in the way that it should. We're also seeing people who have roofs that they can't get homeowners insurance because their roof has reached a certain age, but it may still be in perfectly fine condition. I think there's other things we need to do to look at being creative so that people can stay in their homes, pay the premiums that they're able to, and still continue to get coverage.
Yeah, thank you for that. So you know that in our caucus, we say that every Floridian, what?
Has the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe.
That's right, lady. Okay, so looking forward, are there any policy issues or legislative items that are on your mind about how to help Floridians lead safer, higher quality lives when it comes to climate change?
So, some of the bills that I've sponsored have been really focused on some of our water quality concerns and how we can better prioritize our funding for infrastructure upgrades. Just during this last tropical storm or hurricane, Debbie, we did have wastewater spills. There's local governments are trying to make those investments, but we our water infrastructure money often goes to the people with the most power in Tallahassee, not necessarily the the projects that need the help the most. And so I think every time we're looking at some of those big picture things within our state, we need to be using science, we need to be using data to make decisions and not have them just be purely political decisions. Making sure that we have enough money in our Resilient Florida grant program to help communities not only plan but implement some of these projects. Those are some things that I'm going to continue to champion. I've also been working on a bill that I sponsored last year to expand the My Safe Florida Home program to include some flood mitigation measures for homeowners, so that people, while we're working on some longer term solutions, have some opportunities to stay safer in their homes. Anything we can do to try to increase our renewable energy portfolio is something that we need to be doing, making it easier for homeowners to put rooftop solar. Any roof that doesn't have solar is just it's kind of naked right now. We need to dress it up with a little bit of rooftop solar. So we got to make it easier for our residents to get involved in those programs.
Well, I love those concepts. And folks, I'm beaming with pride because though Representative Cross is a freshman member, I guess technically you're moving on to your sophomore term. We're going to name it and claim that. Though she is a freshman member, you can see just the wisdom and knowledge, like encyclopedic knowledge that she brings to these topics. And you can hear, like I told you at the top of our show, how much she cares about the people and how hard she fights for these issues for each and every one of us to have a life that is safer, a little more free, a little more prosperous, and certainly have those impacts of climate change lessened on all of us. So thank you, Representative Cross, for joining us. We really appreciate it. If people want to find you, what's your website?
My website is lindsaycrossfl.com.
Okay, lindsaycrossfl.com. Thank you so much. I hope you have a terrific night.
Thank you, Leader Driskell. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for spending some time. And so, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Representative Cross. You can see why it's so valuable for us to have her in our caucus, because it just helps to prepare us and to talk about these issues in a data-driven and science-backed way. Sandy's daughter, thank you for piping in the chat. Thank you for tuning in tonight. We're glad to see you too. On this topic of insurance and affordability, I did want to mention this because many of you probably have heard of Project 2025. If you haven't heard of Project 2025 yet, do me a favor, do yourself a favor and Google it tonight, because it is wild. And it puts forth this entire agenda that would be implemented should Donald Trump win the presidency. And he's trying to distance himself from it now. But listen, we have receipts. Like, we have you on record that this is what you wanted to do, sir. And this is a whole agenda that's been promulgated by extremists on the right. So please take a look at it. But I wanted to highlight a couple of aspects of it, because Project 2025 would actually repeal the Inflation Reduction Act, which included many good policies, but it also included President Biden's landmark climate law. It does things like provide grants to help state and local governments adopt the latest building energy codes, which would save the average new homeowner in Florida 11.7% on their utility bills. It will expand clean energy jobs, which would help bring an estimated 62.7 billion with a B, of investment in large-scale clean energy and clean power generation and storage to Florida between now and 2023. So Project 2025 would have a real impact on Florida's economy, on our environment, and I think many aspects of our everyday life. It also could help bring a lot of jobs here that, frankly, we need to be able to lift families up and help them to determine their own destiny. So just know that even though that's happening at the federal level, it could have real world consequences for us in Florida. And folks, this is yet another reason to make sure that you are registered to vote, that your family is registered to vote, that your friends are registered to vote, and make sure that they have a plan to vote as well. As was mentioned, in Florida, we're going through a primary election right now. Election day is August 20th. Don't wait till August 20th, though. You can go ahead and early vote, or if you have a vote by mail ballot, you can turn that in. And then we have to turn all attention to the general election and be prepared to show out and turn out strong in Florida this November. And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or a no party affiliate, whatever it is that you like to affiliate with, or that you don't, my encouragement to you is to actually look at these candidates and look at the policies that they support, look at the values that they represent, and think about it. My dear friend Kristen said this the other day, and I really love it. Like, stop telling me what you're going to vote against, like the things that you don't like. Tell me what it is that you want to vote for, what policies that you want to see, and then look to see what candidates align with those policies and align with those values. Because, friends, I have to tell you, in Florida, the property insurance company does not care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. They're not going to ask you that before they cancel your policy. And the place where you're trying to rent, as you're filling out that rental application, they're not going to ask you your party affiliation. These affordability issues are impacting us all. And I just all want to make sure, I want to make sure that we're all paying attention to like who is pushing the policies that have led us to this place. Here's a hint: the Republicans have been in charge of everything in Florida since 1998. So who's been, responsible for the policies that have led us here, and who are the hardworking folks who have been fighting each and every day for your freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe? And that's the members of my caucus, the Florida House Democratic Caucus, members like the wonderful Representative Lindsey Cross. So this is all we have for you this week. We'll go ahead and leave it here. Thank you again for tuning in. I love our time together. I look forward to it every week. Next week is the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. I'll be there. I'm serving as a delegate. So I can't wait to tell you all about it and bring you some updates from Chicago. So until next time, everybody, take care.